Hello, ladies. It is Tiffany of Clarity, Confidence, Courage. I hope you are having an amazing day. Today, I want to talk about something that I think is really important that I see come up a lot when it comes to women that work in my coaching courses and definitely have gone through a divorce. And that question is, are you addicted to unhappiness? Now, the reason why this is so important is because a lot of times women will find themselves divorced out of the pain of their marriage that they were going through, and yet they're still not happy. Why is that? Why is it that after you have left the pain of the marriage, after you've gotten divorced, after you're supposedly free, you're still miserable? What is the issue? So the question then becomes, well, do you want to be unhappy? Are you just addicted to being miserable? So that's the reason why I wanted to do this video, because I see it so many times and I myself went through it. And I'm going to tell you the reason why you may be addicted to unhappiness and how to turn that around so that you can tap in to joy every single day. All right, as usual, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Definitely hit that notification bell so that you can be notified when I post a video. All right, let's jump into this content. So before we jump into the subject matter, let's unpack this word addiction. Addiction means having an uncontrollable dependency on a substance, a thing, or an activity. So a lot of times when people think about addiction, they think about drug addiction or sex addiction or things like gambling addiction or alcoholism. So those are all just different examples of things that you can be addicted to. Some characteristics of an addictive personality is things such as not being able to stop. You're not able to stop doing the thing, whether it's, the drugs or binge eating or whatever it is. Another characteristic is continuing to expose yourself to the thing or the circumstance, even with negative consequences. So there's a negative consequence coming, but it's, again, you can't stop yourself and you continue to play into this engagement or involvement in this addictive activity or substance. Another behavior is withdrawal symptoms. When you give it up, you go through withdrawals, you feel physical pain or mental pain or emotional pain. It's almost like you want to jump back into that addictive behavior or that addictive drug or whatever it was. Next, let's talk about happiness. Happiness is an emotion. Happiness can be considered a mood. You can literally have one day, and in that day you can be very happy, and next minute or next hour you can be unhappy, right? So a lot of people would say happiness is fleeting. You can't always just capture happiness and keep it always. Well, in this context of the situation, I'm not saying that you should be happy every minute of every second of every day, but what I am saying is that there are people who are addicted to being chronically unhappy. They are miserable people. They're like addicted to misery. And you can see this because they're always complaining. Nothing is ever right. It's always something wrong. Or they're the type of people that can be in a fairly decent mood, but for some reason, every other day, something happens to them where they get into a situation or, a car accident or something is happening to them or someone mistreated them or, they didn't get what they needed. It's always something. And another trait of being addicted to unhappiness, and I've talked about this before, is self-sabotage, especially when you've gotten divorced and you've left the situation, but for some reason you keep ending up in either bad relationships or you keep ending up in situations where the good thing that you had crumbles. It falls apart. Why is this? Because you're the common denominator. It's not happening to anyone else. It's just happening to you. So in the context of this video, when I talk about this idea of being addicted to unhappiness, I'm talking about a personality type who literally every time you see them, every time you're experiencing them, they're in chronic unhappiness. They're chronically complaining. They're chronically miserable. It's never like this status of satisfaction with them. They're always dissatisfied. So the question then becomes, but can you actually be addicted to unhappiness? Well, scientists have recently found in research to show that yes, the brain can be triggered for a reward path when it comes to negative emotions. So you're probably thinking, well, how can the brain be triggered for reward when it comes to negativity? So a few examples that I want to give you. And again, this is science. This isn't me making this up. From a psychological perspective, if you grew up in a cycle of trauma where you've experienced trauma most of your life, When you think about it from a psychological perspective and you go through a traumatic situation and it's chronic, it happens every so often. It's not every single minute of every single day, but it happens every so often. What happens is your brain is trying to find soothing, right? When you go through a traumatic situation, you want to be soothed. You know, if you burn your hand, the thing that you want the most is to get out of that pain immediately. Now, it doesn't mean that you don't want to experience sensation, stimulus, right? But you want to get out of that extreme pain right at that moment. So when you're going through trauma, especially in childhood, over and over again, one thing that happens is your brain gets accustomed to going through the trauma and then something happens to soothe it. So if you've been getting beaten, eventually the beating stops because the person who's beating you stops the beating. And then you go in your room and you might cry. Well, that's the soothing. As human beings, when it comes from a psychological perspective, there are things where you can experience and you get trapped in a cycle. And you get trapped in a cycle of the stimulus. And then after the stimulus, you get a reward. And so the brain normalizes it. So that in and of itself is an addictive pattern. The brain starts to normalize a certain type of stimulus and then a certain type of reward at the end of it. Now, I'm not saying this is a good thing, but when it comes to addiction a lot of times is unconscious. And especially when I talk about in the context of being addicted to misery or addicted to unhappiness or addicted to mistreatment, it's not a conscious act. You're not saying, I want to be unhappy. Most of the time, people that are addicted to misery, they're not saying that. They're not saying they want to be addicted to misery. They're not actually consciously thinking that I like this. I'm enjoying this miserable feeling. But subconsciously, yes, there is a reward at the end of misery. If a child cries continuously and a parent comes and picks them up and rocks them to sleep, well, that child starts to understand that, well, if I cry a lot, which I don't want to cry, but if I cry a lot, my parent comes, gets me. Well, there's a reward. So next time I'm going to keep crying and they're going to keep picking me up. You see what I mean? Stimulus, reward. That's how the brain looks at it. There is no such thing as happiness and unhappiness in the brain. The brain says, there's a stimulus, here's a reward. How do I get from here to there? The other thing is that the brain wants to keep us as human beings in status quo. That's why it's so difficult when people are trying to lose weight. In the beginning, it feels really hard. And you'll start off really good. You'll lose that first 5 pounds, then you'll sabotage and you'll start eating junk food all over again. It's like, why did I do that? And you feel guilty. Well, it's because you're changing your body. And the one thing that the human body and the brain doesn't want to do, it doesn't want to change. It normalizes a status quo. It normalizes that feeling of everything is normal here and we just want to stay here. Human beings in general don't want to change. That is the hardest thing for us to do. That's why behavioral change is so hard. From a psychological perspective, again, there's literally stages to behavioral change. It doesn't just happen overnight. So yes, ladies, it is possible for you, unfortunately, to be addicted to unhappiness because subconsciously your brain has normalized it. Your brain has normalized a certain level and it says you're not going to move from that level because I've gotten used to this level down here. I've gotten used to the chaos and then the reward and then the chaos and then the reward and then it continues. But here's the thing, ladies, you don't have to keep putting yourself through that in order to get the reward. You can change your behavior so that the stimulus that you receive is not a bad stimulus, it's a good stimulus. And then the reward feels even better. So you're probably thinking, well, Tiffany, I think that's me. I think I'm addicted to unhappiness. I'm always complaining. I'm always miserable. Nothing is ever right. How do I figure out how to feel good? How do I get out of this chronic cycle of being addicted to unhappiness? The first step that I would tell you to do is to start having gratitude for everything. Start saying thank you to everything. When you wake up in the morning, write a list of things that you're grateful for, even if it's just 3 things. And if you really want to take it a step further, thank anything in your house. So if you love your phone, say phone, thank you. If you love your hair, say hair, thank you. If you love, your TV, say TV, thank you. Thank everything. Be thankful for every single thing. I know it sounds weird, but the more you get accustomed to saying thank you and being grateful and not just saying the words, but feeling the emotions with it. Like if I were to say, I'm so thankful for my phone, or phone thank you. Trust me, I mean it. My phone is like, it's a computer in my pocket, right? I take it everywhere I go. It helps me speak and communicate to other people. I can take pictures on it. Like, I'm really thankful for my phone. And just talking about it brought me a sense of satisfaction and joy. See how that works? See how you have a stimulus of being grateful, and then the reward is the feeling of satisfaction and joy? If you complain, you're going to get more of the feelings of misery. But if you give gratitude, you get the opposite. The reward then becomes the feelings of more joy, of more. Secondly, start journaling. If you have not journaled yet, it is an amazing thing. I journal every day. I love journaling. Sometimes I'll have an experience or an event and I'm like, oh, I need to write this down in my journal. When you're able to journal your feelings, it gives you time to reflect on what it is you're experiencing. So for example, let's say you're a divorced woman, and let's say, someone does something and you don't like it, or you're like, why did they do that? Or when you're able to write it down and really write down the experience, and then write down some reflective questions like, what was it about that experience that I did not like? Is it that the person is a bad person? Or is it that there's something going in me where that behavior triggered me specifically because of my background? Like, really take the time to be reflective. Because what journaling will do, when you journal about your negative experiences or what you perceive as a negative emotion or a negative person or whatever it is, when you're able to truly reflect, you might find that it has nothing to do with the person. It has nothing to do with the experience. It may be a situation where you are being triggered because you have been so accustomed to going through abuse or negative experiences or things that you went through with your ex that it almost feels like you're drawing it to you. You're so accustomed to seeing that instead of seeing all the other good things that maybe that person did, because you're so addicted to the negativity, to focusing all your attention on negativity. So when you're able to really journal it out and be reflective, it helps give you perspective. Next, when you have what you perceive as a negative experience, I want you to ask yourself this: what good can I learn from this experience? So if a waitress brings your food and it's not the food that you ordered, or it comes out cold, or before you get super, super angry, just ask yourself, why did I have this experience? What good can I come out of this? Now you might be saying, well, Tiffany, that's a stretch. If my food came out cold and I wanted it warm, how is that good? Well, just ask yourself, what can I learn from this experience? Let me tell you what you can learn. You can learn patience. You can learn compassion. You can learn understanding that the food being cold was not the waitress's fault. So there's no reason to yell at her. It just happened. So you can calmly ask her to take it back and have it warm. So that in that moment, you learned a lesson. So every time you have what you perceive to be a negative experience, ask yourself, why is this a good thing? What is the lesson that I can learn for myself out of this? So that is another thing you can do to slowly start unraveling that trigger emotion to be unhappiness, that feeling of having to quickly go into unhappiness mode or misery mode. When you have something that you're not quite happy about, ask yourself, how can I turn this around? How can I see the lesson in this? Or how can I find at least that small thing where I can say, okay, maybe this isn't as bad as I'm making it out to be. I challenge you to do that. Lastly, you need to create a self-care plan. If you haven't done so already, trust me, it is invaluable. When I say a self-care plan, I mean things like a weekly massage, or having a bath every night, a nice warm hot bath, or giving yourself time to meditate, or taking every Sunday and going to the park and going for a nice walk. Or if you like to read, having a book, taking that to the park and giving yourself time to read. The idea is to get accustomed to what it feels like to feel good. Because when you are in a situation, especially when you go through a cycle of trauma or a cycle where you have gone through abuse or neglect or whatever it is, it's difficult for you to discern what good is. What does it feel like to feel good? You're so accustomed to that stimulus, quick stimulus, painful stimulus, and quick reward that you no longer understand what truly feeling good feels like. So you have to give yourself that space to do things that make you feel good. So the brain is no longer seeking that really painful chaos and then the soothing reward. You give yourself the reward up front. So the idea is to change the stimulus from chaos to soothing, to a little bit more of a moderate stimulus, something that actually makes you feel good. And the reward is that you just feel better afterwards. So it's about changing how your brain views getting the reward, going through that cycle of change and going through that cycle of stimulus and reward. You got to change that stimulus to something that isn't painful. Change it to something that makes you feel good. And the reward is that you continue to feel good. You feel even better. Now, if you're in a place where you like this content and you like this information, make sure you share, like, and subscribe. And if you want to connect with me even more, definitely go to my website, Clarity, Confidence, Courage, and download my free 5-day mindset detox to get yourself in a place where you start to do the mental shift. And that is going to get you on the path to more clarity, more confidence, and more courage to step into a life that you love. All right, I'll be talking to you soon. I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.